Good morning. Happy Friday. Today is Friday, September 25th, 2020. My name is Susan Gerhard, and we can tell that it's the last Friday of the month because Jane Curtis is here with us to give us another lesson in history. Good morning, Jane.
Good morning.
So, who are we going to talk about today, or what are we going to talk about?
Well, we're going to talk about a most interesting kind of three things at the same time.
Okay.
But first of all, I want to do a little recognition of RBG, of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And I want to say we have really lost a giant. And we aren't commemorating her specifically today because I'm sure all of us have seen lots of that wonderful film thing, that documentary they had on her, and the airwaves have been full of it. And we've been making our respects to her. We will, however, keep her in mind strongly, particularly in our November show, where we draw some historical lessons, perhaps, or take a look at the past history of situations like this one.
And that will be interesting to learn about that in November. So we'll look forward to the last Friday in November.
But right now, I think she would very much approve of what we're talking about.
You know, I wonder if she knew the story of the lady about whom we're going to talk today.
I wouldn't be surprised because she tended to have a finger in every interesting pie and every important pie.
Right.
But Nellie Bly is the person we're talking about. And Nellie Bly was in some ways a little bit like RBG because she excelled in several different things, but she kept her mind on the prize most of the time.
Yes.
And the prize for her was, I'd say maybe of all her virtues, charity was the most. But let's go forward a little bit.
Okay.
And first, for picture number one, we will see a shot of young Nellie Bly. Now, her name was not Nellie Bly.
And what was her name?
Her name was Elizabeth Cochran.
So how did she get Nellie Bly?
She got the name Nellie when she was young. Now, we'll start a little bio on her. When she was 16 years old, she and her mother moved from the suburbs of Pittsburgh into Pittsburgh. That was Cochran's Mills, which I understand is now just part of the city. But they moved in, and she was obviously at that age reading newspapers, and the Pittsburgh Dispatch was already a prominent newspaper. So she read an article in there, and this article had the title of "What can we do? What can we do? What are girls good for?"
Oh,
and that, of course, tender as she was and unexperienced in the world, raised tackles a little bit. And so she wrote a letter to the editor.
I think you've lost your mic. I think it. There we go. So she wrote a letter to the editor.
She wrote a letter to the editor, and she said, "This is perfectly terrible, saying that girls are only for having babies and cleaning house, keeping house, nothing else." And the article was so very well written and so well put that the editor got in touch with her. Now, of course, she was anonymous at that point. He said, "Please, whoever wrote this letter, get in touch." And she did. And he instantly commissioned another article. I don't believe he gave her the title.
So she was very young at this point.
She was before 16 years old.
Oh my gosh.
She was born in 1864. So here it is, all of 1880.
Yeah.
She wrote this article, and the article was sort of predicated upon divorce, the problems of divorce for women, which leads me to think that perhaps that's why she and her mother were on their own. But she wrote this article We're
going to get a little help here with Jane's microphone, which tried to escape.
Thank you very much.
There we go. So at age 16, she made herself a journalist.
And the thing was well written and everything. You just wonder really all about it. But she obviously had plenty of talent inside and motivation.
Sure.
And she paid attention to things around her. But she did so well on that article that he instantly said, "Work for me.
Yeah.
Stay, become one of people on my staff." And she did. And she instantly became known for investigative journalism. And then a question arose.
So was it that editor that gave her the name Nellie Bly?
Well, it was.
Oh.
And we shall see in one moment.
Okay.
She was assigned to doing various women's type things.
Uh-oh.
You know, the teas and the theater and the
Sure.
weddings and funerals and that kind of thing. But after she had written this one, she wanted to go out and do a piece. She had somehow been exposed to the Women's Insane Asylum there, and that was a very gross thing, and she got herself committed, which is astounding, which is brave.
When she was still that young then?
She was that young. She went to the, after the Women's Insane Asylum really was in New York. I'm getting ahead of my story a little bit.
That was a little later in her career.
But she was writing this excellent stuff. Well, he said to her, they sat down, he said, now, it's not ladylike, it's uncouth for you not to have a pen name. So you must have a pen name. We cannot say this is by Elizabeth Cochran. I mean, it just won't do. So they thought, and it's late afternoon, the shadows are deepening. They've got to do something because they've got to go to press. So now the story in this excellent book, this biography, which I don't think, however, is true, was that a copy boy came by and he was whistling. And that's
which is
Hey,
Stephen
Nellie.
Foster's song.
Stephen Foster's song, Nellie Bly. Hey, Nellie, ho, Nellie. So they said, that's it, Nellie Bly. You are Nellie Bly.
And that's how she got the name.
And that's how she got the name.
Wow.
Well, Nellie did a terrific expose on this Women's Insane Asylum by actually living there for upwards of 2 weeks.
Wow.
But there was such a reaction to it that temporarily she was put back onto the sort of women's issue stuff.
So the newspaper didn't necessarily want to be in the business of social issues, which is what that became.
they got some unpleasant reaction to it. So meanwhile, she's working for them. It's 1885 comes along, and he sends her off to Mexico, where Porfirio Diaz, this was a great review of history for me. Porfirio Diaz is a tyrant. He's tyrannical, and he's exciting all kinds of resistance in Mexico and so on. Well, she, in one of the chapters of her book on her tour of duty in Mexico was about that. So complaints came in. So back to the...
So in today's terms, if she was doing that kind of journalism, she would become a journalistic star because she was doing these hard-hitting pieces.
And it was a forerunner of the rest of her career that she stuck with that. Now another picture number 2 will show us, this was a shot taken at the time she had been in Mexico. And you can see she was all dressed up and whatnot. She's still only 25 years old, or 21 years old, and doing this wonderful investigative journalism. Mm-hmm. Time goes on. She does exposés there. The people protest against it, the people who are affected by it. And she says to her editor one day, you know, I read Around the World in 80 Days by Jules Verne, and I think I can do it faster than Phileas Fogg. And he says, yes, that sounds fine. And he puts it on the back burner. A year later, however, I guess circulation was dropping a bit. So he said, well, what can I do that'll be a pot boiler?
He remembered that.
So he takes
in reading her book, it really was kind of a surprise to her at that point because she'd put forward that idea and they said, no, a woman couldn't travel alone. That just wouldn't be proper. You can't do that.
Well,
and he remembered it.
Things changed anyway.
Yeah.
And that's as good a motive as any for thinking of why he might do something like that. But he revived the idea. However, with only 2 days' notice, he decided to do it. Nellie, 2 days from now, you are going. So
you're on your way.
Let's have a picture. Nellie being a very organized mind as well as a full and open mind. This is a picture of Nellie. That's all she had with her.
That's her ready to go.
She had the dress she was wearing, underneath, and you can see a bulge in the jacket where all that fruit
Sure.
stuff came in the dress. She has a sturdy overcoat. She has a kind of deerstalker cap. That's her suitcase. That thing looks like a doctor's kit. That's it. Or she had very...
She was adamant about taking no more than that. And it was interesting in the book, every once in a while she says, you know, I tried to push this into the suitcase, I tried to get this into the bag, and at one point she was going through customs, and they didn't understand that she just had this one bag.
Well, it expanded a little bit later, because later on, in fact, she bought a pet monkey somewhere, and she had certain other things going on. But Nellie, now, can we see that picture once again just for a moment, and then we'll go on to the next one. This picture you see, she's wearing gloves, she has all this stuff, and she has her bag, and she's strong, she's a healthy gal, fairly tall. Now in the next picture.
Before we leave this one, I was interested that the dress that she wore, she went to a dressmaker and said, I need a dress and I need it today.
And I need it today, and
And
they did.
it was a very fine dressmaker who didn't flinch,
Yeah.
and they picked out the fabrics, and I think by 1 o'clock in the afternoon she had her first fitting and picked up the dress at 5 o'clock.
She got right moving. But this picture number 3 now, the third picture we have here, this is a later ad. Of course, later on, they exploited it, and the newspaper promoted it for some money-making things, in addition to the circulation just going wild. But Nellie, you can see her there. She's walking a tightrope. This is an ad for bicarbonate of soda, of all things. But she's walking this tightrope. In her left hand, she's holding her umbrella. In her right hand, she got the case. And then the thing that's not in that other picture of her, around her neck, she has her money. She has this flat, typical, she has, I suppose, a passport, but she has 200 English pounds in bills and a little gold and a little American money. But there she is, that's it, that's all.
And that's interesting about the bag, because we can open any kind of travel magazine or any kind of travel place in an airport, and they are selling just exactly that, a bag to put your money and your passport in.
I never noticed. Well, that's good. But she goes.
And she left at an odd time of year. She left on November 14th.
November 14th, 1889, yes. And this, I guess, was, I don't know why the newspaper didn't think maybe circulation would increase at Christmas time or whatever, but whatever their motivation. So she left from Jersey City.
Oh,
Actually,
that answers
was
the question.
Immediate point of departure.
She talked about a bay, and I thought, there's no bay around New York.
Yeah, well,
so that makes sense.
She did, and then up to New York. But she went aboard a German steamer, the Augusta, what is it?
Augusta Victoria.
Augusta Victoria, yeah. Victoria's daughter, I guess, was queen at that point. No, wait a minute, 1889, Victoria herself was still. But she took off by ship, boarded ship, and there was some publicity going on for that. It was a reasonable crossing. And there was a little difficulty in England. She had to go on to England to catch a train. Now, there was a train that ran uninterbroken from England, from London to Brindisi in the heel of Italy. And from there, and of course, the rules were she could only have commercial transportation, no hiring anything.
Right.
So she missed a connection somewhere. There was some difficulty anyway. And in rearranging the schedule, they discovered she would have a little time. So in France, she arranged to travel via Amiens, the city of Amiens, where Jules Verne resided.
And she was
with
so
his wife.
excited about that.
And he was excited about it. And the wife was lovely. They were already, I think, sort of olderish couple by then. But she did, and got off in a couple of days with them. They were enthralled with her, because here she was, open-faced, lovely American gal,
Right.
And ready to go, and doing this very, very brave thing.
Right.
She could have died of it.
There's Jules Verne saying, okay, I wrote this book around the world in 80 days, but there was a fiction. And this young lady is going to really try to do it herself.
Here she's really doing it. So,
well, let's back up 1 second. What was the promise that she made to her editor and how fast she could do this? It wasn't 80 days.
Oh, she said 70.
75, was
70,
it?
yeah.
Yeah.
It was upper in the 70s. Anyway, she beat her promise.
Yes.
Yes.
But that's it. We're not there in the story yet.
And they even counted the seconds.
Yes.
It was,
Yeah,
it was 14 seconds.
At the end of her book
end.
is all of the calculations.
Because, you see, the newspaper ran a contest, I guess, the exact length to the second of Nellie's traversing the globe. And this was some 42,000 kilometers, or it was approximately 25,000 miles, which is just about the equatorial
Right.
extent of the Earth's circumference.
Right.
Yeah.
So she traveled by train.
So
she
down
finally
she-
got back on a train that was going to Brindisi.
Brindisi. She gets to Brindisi with not exactly just moments to spare, but not a lot of time to spare to catch a ship. So the first thing she does was hightail it to the local telegraph office. And her entire communication, of course, had to be by telegraph or by mail. Now, I don't know why the telegraph wasn't. It is said that she was limited in how much she could say in the telegraph.
Maybe how many words?
Well, I don't know why, because the telegraph was first used in the Crimean War to any extent in reporting, of course, war correspondence at that point. But at any rate, she was somewhat limited. But she went down there and she sent her message, and she picked up anything that was there for her. But of course, the newspaper had contacts all over in these places, communications.
So, although she doesn't say in her book, I know I have seen in old newspapers that it appears she was sending back regular reports, and they were publishing them so that the newspaper readers of the United States were seeing, kind of following this trip
They were,
with her.
except that the ones in writing, the dispatches, were a few days late.
Yeah.
Because they had to go by
Sure.
land transport.
Yeah. But, as you read them in the newspaper, it's like, oh, Nellie Bly's here now. You know, she's really doing this.
So he really involved the world, really.
Yes.
Because people would recognize who she was.
Yes.
But on this, the first port of call was Suez. And picture Suez in 1889.
Yes.
She could have died of typhoid fever any minute, practically. Anything. But she, I think it was on that voyage that a fortune hunter tried to make overtures. But here's Nellie, who of course is not old yet, but older now than that teenager she was when she did such fantastic
And she was
things.
her focus was not on, although she tells us about what she was seeing, her focus was really on getting to the end.
Oh, yes, indeed it was.
Right.
But as we find out later, she was not hell-bent on beating anything or anybody except Phileas Fogg's record.
Yes.
But on that voyage to Suez, I think that was one of these segments by sea. A fortune hunter tried to get at her, and she saw that for what it was and got rid of it.
She was a sharp lady.
Oh, she was just darling, and here she was. But that first picture I showed you of her, that open-eyed, wide-eyed, highly intelligent look, but almost still childlike look on her face.
So she goes through the Suez Canal.
She goes through the Suez Canal
and stops next in Aden, which is in what is Yemen now.
Or Aden, Aden. A famous spot for the British Army. Of course, the British had quite an installation there, and she did a wonderful side trip there up to some ancient ruins, and there she got almost poetic.
Her writing changes in her book. It changes from being very journalistic, and then there are a few points where we have some paragraphs that are very poetic.
She goes from the one to the other. I don't think it was probably deliberate, but it was a wonderful technique for keeping things moving. But the next port of call was Colombo in Ceylon, Sri Lanka nowadays.
I was Google mapping a lot of this as I read. Colombo, where is that?
And what did Phileas Fogg do? No, he went overland through India, step by elephant step, step by step across India. So she, I suppose with a little help from other planners, but she went under India there, to Ceylon.
So she had to stay a little bit in Ceylon, I think, before she was able to get another connection.
Well,
And
this
she
was all
went-
planned in advance, you
Yeah.
see. Although it was subject to change always.
Always.
Because of weather and just in general.
So from Ceylon, she went then to,
Well, she went to actually the Straits, but in Ceylon, she had several days to spend, and she did some good sightseeing there.
Yeah.
And this appealing to the readers. But you can imagine nowadays with all this business about, purify your water, here's malaria here, and there's that there. Don't eat this and don't. She just went.
yeah,
And was
I couldn't, I was very conscious of that
remarkable.
as I read it.
She had an iron constitution,
Yeah.
and sleeping was just all cattywampus.
Just whenever.
Sometimes
that wasn't
not at
important to
all,
her.
and whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the ship went up through the Straits then, and she went to Penang, which was in the colonies there in Malaysia. It's now part of Indonesia,
Right.
and around to Singapore, where again she did some nice sightseeing. And if you've been to these places, I've been to a lot of these.
Have you?
Think what they were like in 1889.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And then Hong Kong, and of course the boats in the harbor. And she doesn't mention any details, I don't think too much about how you took a boat over the actual island of Hong Kong.
Right.
But then the last step was going to be Japan, was
Right.
Yokohama, where all the ships went. There was some delay in the shipping because of a schedule.
So she
But
got stuck
then-
for a few days there.
So she got stuck, as it were, for a few days. That's where I believe she bought the monkey. I think it was Hong Kong
Yeah.
where she bought the monkey, which caused a little stir now and again. But she still had nothing. They'd say, and where, madame, is your luggage? And
Right.
people,
She was
porters
asked
would
that
rush
many
up.
times.
This is it.
This is
So,
that's all I have.
the last stage from Yokohama to San Francisco was nasty. Terrible, terrible weather. Just awful. But she surmounted it without going into any detail. We have a little more of her career to cover, so we mustn't stay too long.
And we have 5 minutes.
on this.
So.
Well, we better bring it to a quick close. In San Francisco, they had a problem because the train schedules were wiped out by
But in San Francisco,
extreme snow.
she was met as if she was a star.
All over.
Everybody knew about
Everywhere in
Nellie.
the country. People came out at 2 o'clock in the morning if the
Right.
train was going to go. No, and she didn't get much sleep there.
So
But
she
no,
got on the train.
She couldn't take the train that she had planned to because the snow was an unusual winter in the Rockies. And later on, I'm mention that again because somebody else was doing Around the World, and they had a horrific. We might talk about her some other time.
Yeah.
But so it was really bad. But they go way south and then come
There
way
was a
back.
point where I think they had a special train for her.
Well, they were mainly for her. They weren't really allowed to have any specials, but they sort of did, and they had some other people
Yeah.
on it. But she went then via Pittsburgh, where she was just absolutely lionized.
Oh, I'm
I don't
sure.
think she got any sleep at all night. But then on back to the East Coast and to Jersey City. And please, let's look at the next pictures now. I think we've looked at only 3. Let's look at the next one. This is a board game. This is another one of the things the newspaper was sponsoring while she was gone. You can see it was involved, but it had all of her stops and things she said. Then the next picture shows us something that was on the box for the game. Let's see the next shot, please.
Oh, there we go.
And we have old Uncle Wiggily and so on, and they had just that style printing. That was color, really color. But on to the next picture. And this is her welcome in Jersey City, New Jersey, which strictly speaking was the place where
she'd started.
Her toe, she had it, that was the thing, because that was where her toe had left the ground, to go to New York for this.
And so that's when the counting stopped.
But if you look closely at this now, you can see, of course, there's a mayor there. I think he's tipping his hat. This was I had to use a picture that's a picture of a picture of a picture, but it's pretty good. Then you see down there a train, and you see people riding up on horses and all across the country.
Right, it was a great excitement. So by the time she ended, can I read some of these statistics?
Well, just quick, because we have more ground to cover.
She went a total of 21,740 miles.
Gosh.
And the number of hours spent traveling was 1,356 hours and 41 minutes. Just amazing. And it was 72 days, 6 hours, and 11 minutes. She's an amazing lady.
Yeah.
And we're out of time, but I do want to tell our watchers that you can go online if you just type in around the world in 72 hours, you're going to come up with one of the choices being the book that she wrote describing this journey. And it's free. There are other places you can buy it, but it's free online, I think, through the University of Pennsylvania.
Other people, had done it in previous years, but not completely and not in that short amount of time.
Right.
So she was really the crowning achievement there.
I hope we can learn more about the rest of Nellie's career in another show.
Well, I was hoping to cover it here, but you see, it's part of the in the history of journalism. It's very important. This was the first time a woman had really done anything like that. Now, another one we might do in another show is another woman who did it. The rival newspaper sent out that evening, the evening of the day Nellie left in the morning, they sent this other one. But now, this picture, let's have that picture again, please. And we'll go on to, now the next one. Nellie was also an inventor. Now, she had a few down years after the end of it. She was still a lion for about a year afterward, and then there was some litigation about something or other. But she, in 1895, because it was 1890 by the time she got back, 1895, she married an older man named Seaman, and he had owned a factory and ran this factory of making metal covering things. And she invented this type of milk can, which I guess was in use for decades afterward, and several other things. This is her patent drawings. Next picture. And in World War I, she stayed pretty well out of the news. She wasn't hired by any, but in 1914, she went off as a foreign correspondent.
Good for her.
And here she is with a Polish officer. And she didn't just sit in London, going to the correspondence bar every night or something.
Oh, no, that wouldn't be her.
But she went to the Austrian-Serbian front, dangerous, and a tricky spot. So
Jane, we're going to have to leave her there because we're out of time.
Let us just come to her end, because when she went, after that, the charity segment took over, because all that time she had used her resources. Her factory was a model of having good things for the employees and so on. And she lived in a Hotel McAlpin in New York. And she died at 57, so she may have weakened herself in the long trip or something, who knows. But she did anyway, and she was known as, so if you needed help, you went to her.
Nellie would help.
And the hotel at first got a little exercised by all sorts of people showing up in the lobby, begging for help. But she helped them out. She gave money. She mentions one whose husband was killed or lost his job or something there. She was a woman with 3 or 4 children. She came in. Nellie helped them out.
And
Nellie, of course, she had financial resources.
Yeah.
But all these things, any one of them would have been a career in itself. But it was a great discovery for me, because after reading this excellent book, which is a study of her trip.
So this is someone else's book about
Nellie. This is a
Nellie.
book about another
and it's called 80
journalist.
Days?
It's just called 80 Days, but it's about her trip and this rival one that the other thing put up, and they're both very...
So now I'm going to have to go back and see if I can find a copy of that one.
I might lend you if you promise to be very good.
Oh, I would take good care of it.
But at any rate, she
Jane,
was a
thank
person.
you for introducing
She was
us
a
to Nellie.
real American.
She
all
was.
these different things, and good at them all.
And I have to share one thing quickly. My grandmother was just a few years younger than Nellie, and I firmly believe, and her name was Nellie.
Wow.
And I firmly believe it was Nellie's travels that gave my grandmother the idea that she should travel to the West Coast, to California, on the train by herself to visit some relatives there, and her mother let her do it. And I think that Nellie Bly must have been the initiator of it, the influencer, as they call them today.
A lot of little girls must have
I'm sure.
found inspiration, yeah.
So we need to say goodbye, and thank you so much.
Thank
This
you.
has been exciting, and thank you for encouraging me to read about Nellie.